Walt Whitman and Herman Melville, two key figures of American literature in the latter half of the 19th century. Ask almost anyone about these two authors, and they'll probably bring up Leaves of Grass or Moby Dick, which is fair because those are their defining works. Now ask anyone what they have in common: head scratches. As a matter of fact, these two writers couldn't be anything but different from each other in terms of form, style, etc. However, despite these obvious differences, both of these renowned authors indeed wrote about similar topics and addressed them in their own way. One of these topics is the topic of homoeroticism. It is no surprise that Whitman touched on the homoerotic themes and topics in his writing, given the nature of his very fluid sexuality. In some cases, he is referred to as the Good Gay Poet, which is a play on his other nickname, the Good Gray Poet. It has also been noted that he had various romances with men, such as Peter Doyle. The first instance in which these homoerotic tendencies show is in his collection of poems, Song of Myself, specifically in section 11. This section talks about 28 young men bathing by the shore while a young woman watches. As she watches them, she sexually fantasizes about being down there with them as the 29th bather. Now, at first glance, this might seem like typical Whitman stuff where he is simply writing from the perspective of a woman, given his nature of wanting to encompass the voice of everyone, men and women alike. However, looking closely with Whitman's sexuality in mind, it has led to possible readings that this could indeed be, from his own point of view, and a glimpse of his fluid sexuality. So instead of these being the sexual fantasies of a young woman, these are in actuality the sexual fantasies of Whitman. The homoerotic images do not end there. Another section of Leaves of Grass is entitled Calamus, after the calamus grass, which is better known as sweet flag. This image of the calamus grass is an important one, not only because it is a part of the Whitman mythos involving grass, but also because of the image of the grass itself. It is very much a phallic image since it strongly resembles an erect penis, which was probably done deliberately. Whitman, you sly dog. Melville has plenty to say about this as well. Amid the craziness and chaos that is Moby Dick, surrounded by different themes, motifs, allusions, and let's face it, useless whale facts, is a homoerotic relationship between the protagonist Ishmael and his harpooner friend Queequeg. Throughout the book, there are various hints to this relationship that can easily be overlooked with everything else going on. The first sign of this can be found in the 3rd chapter, after Ishmael checks into the Spouted Wren and is stuck sharing the bed with Queequeg. After they spend their first night together, Ishmael wakes up to find Queequeg's arm thrown over him in the most loving and affectionate manner, even joking that you would think he was his wife due to how tightly he was embracing him. Then, there's a description of the patterns of squares on Queequeg's arm that blends into the quilt, to the point where Ishmael cannot tell the difference between the two, which could symbolize some sort of deeper connection between them, which is hinted at again in the story. Ishmael and Queequeg find themselves lying in bed again and having an intimate conversation before they sleep, such as a man and a wife, even joking on the matter himself, saying Queequeg and him were a cozy, loving pair. We then get details of them in bed together, such as the physical contact between the two, with Queequeg throwing his legs over Ishmael and drawing them back freely, which could be considered somewhat homoerotic or just erotic sexual imagery. The strong connection and bond between the two continues along with wedding and marriage symbolism. For example, in chapter 72, when getting the parts of the whale, Ishmael and Queequeg are connected via the monkey rope, with both of them depending on each other's life. Ishmael describes this process as them being wedded together. This is very similar to the marriage lasso that is used in weddings after the bride and groom exchange their vows, which symbolizes their everlasting union until death. So it is actually very appropriate that Ishmael described their union like this, and more appropriate on Melville's end for choosing this wording. Ultimately, even after death does them part, Queequeg is still with Ishmael at the end of it all. In chapter 110, Queequeg comes down with a terrible fever which unfortunately results in his death. This introduces his coffin, which at the end of the book is what saves Ishmael's life after the furious Moby Dick sinks to Pequod and uses the coffin as a lifefloat. This demonstrates that the bond, or in this case love, between Ishmael and Queequeg is so strong that not even death can separate them, and that even after death, Queequeg is still there for Ishmael. Initially, both of these writers faced many hardships and harsh criticisms for writing about these topics. Whitman had many of his poems censored or banned because of their homoerotic and overall sexual nature, and Moby Dick underperformed in sales and was received very, very poorly upon its release. However, in hindsight, it can be said that these two have aged like a very, very fine wine and have received the recognition they deserve. It has led to more progressive readings of their works and many appraisals. With that said, it can be argued that Whitman and Melville were just simply ahead of their time. Thank you.